Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And we have made it to Friday. It feels like a Friday, and I'm glad we're here. And you might notice it's a different Phil. It's not the FIL Phil. It's the PHIL Phil. Sounds like a bit of a rap song, but Phil Waters is traveling back from the Big Island of Hawaii to his home in Houston, Texas. And while I told him to do it live from his private jet, he, by the way, it's a Ferrari jet. He declined. He said he'd be too busy crying that he's leaving behind sweet little Nugget. So he will join us next week. For those who have been living under a rock, this is Scott Duffey, Professor Scott Duffey, looking very professorial. As I was saying, retired FBI agent, retired police officer, and now a professor at the Wilmington University Criminal Justice Institute. So there you have it. And then the man with a resume that goes on for days is Detective Phil Ramos, three-time Las Vegas Police Officer of the Year, 15 years in homicide, 30-plus years in the force. The guy smuggled $1 million through a casino to go undercover with the Cuban mob. He was at Tupac's autopsy. Shall I go on? No, that's enough. And he is here. Scott, I feel like I haven't seen you in a lifetime. How have you been, Scott?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it feels like it's been ages, hasn't it?
Yeah, I was at that Sarah Boone trial, and the last two Fridays I was busy with that. In your life before this, Scott Duffey, had you ever heard of a woman zipping her boyfriend into a suitcase and leaving him to die prior to this?
No, not leaving him to die part. So no.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. But you did hear about someone's just zipping them in there for fun, but not leaving them to die.
Sure.
Interesting. Phil Ramos, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, in your amazing career at the Las Vegas Police Department, did you ever have to cover a case, investigate a case where a woman zipped her boyfriend into a suitcase? And if not, what is the weirdest homicide that you covered during your time in Vegas?
Well, the only zippered suitcases, had two of them, but they were already dead and dismembered, so they weren't exactly fit the same scenario. But man, that was just a crazy one. I had never heard that. And then her excuse of hide and seek, that was just nuts. As far as weird cases, man, there's so many.
What's one that sticks out? What's one that's just bizarre that sticks out to you?
Probably, and this is unsolved, so I have to kind of keep it a little quiet. Little working girl outside of town, her completely dismembered body was found on a section of I-15 that is very heavily traveled. It took us 1.5 years just to identify who she was, and all we've been able to find is her torso. Her legs are never been found. Head hasn't been found. Arms haven't been found. And she was about a month pregnant. She was working for a pimp that was in prison, and it's one of those that you just always remember. I mean, the condition of her body, the way it was found, no leads. I'm 95% certain she's a victim of a serial killer, because there were other similar cases within 50 miles of here that had some very striking resemblances. So that was kind of a weird one, and the weirdest part of it I can't go into because it's crucial evidence, and I don't want to let that out. But
Wow.
it was the craziest case you've ever had. That's the first one that comes to mind.
Wow. And I assume that you cannot unsee what you've seen there, correct?
Oh no, man, no. I mean, sometimes they come to you in the middle of the night, and sometimes while you're sitting at Burger King, you just never know when it happens. Well, it's just something reminds you of it, and you replay the whole thing in your head.
Wow.
That's the nature of the job, though.
And this is why I say law enforcement deserves all the respect in the world. They see things that I know I couldn't handle seeing. Look at Nick here. Banfields live in my cul-de-sac in Fairfax County, Virginia. We're about to get into this story of Brendan and Christine Banfield. Another interesting, to put it lightly, story. Becky Ireland, thank you. Love STS. Beat the goal, peeps. I don't know exactly what that means, but I don't know. Yeah, sometimes it does feel like a broken world here. Scott Duffey, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you the same question before we dive into this. Is there a bizarre, weird story that sticks out in your storied career? Perhaps a legless bank robber or an armless bank, anything along these lines?
No, I wouldn't say bizarre. I mean, there's some unsolved that you wish you could have given something to give to your successor, as they remain cold cases. I think about them a lot, and sometimes when I come up with a thought that maybe I haven't shared or whatnot, I'll call the detective and say, "Here, just thinking of this. If you haven't already thought of it." But yeah, it is something when something goes unsolved, and it's especially when it comes to a homicide.
Yeah, well, in the case of Phil's story, PHIL, it'd be very terrifying if this serial killer was still out there. But we all know weird things definitely happen in Vegas. Thank you, MJ. I think this is a second super sticker here for Phil, Joel, Phil Scott, and the CEO. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. So this story, I'm just going to deconstruct it. We have not covered this yet. And here we go. So there's a woman by the name of Juliana Peres Magalhaes, which is the Brazilian pronunciation. Her lover, a guy named Brendan Banfield, was indicted this past September by a Fairfax County grand jury. He is charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 charge of use of a firearm in the commission of a felony. And why? Because he is alleged to have murdered his own 37-year-old wife, Christine Banfield, and then shot another man. Who that man is, it sounds like a mystery, but we're about to break it down. But Scott Duffey, let me just stop here and ask the question that we always ask. The bottom line is this woman, Juliana, who is 24 at the time, is having an affair with the man who hired her to be her au pair. An affair with an au pair. It rhymes. I'm a poet, and I don't even know it. Scott Duffey, why doesn't the husband just divorce the wife? They've got a 4-year-old daughter. Why does he have to figure out? And we'll get into how he tried to get away with it. It was an unusual scheme, to say the least. Why not just, and by the way, here are the people in this story. You've got Brendan Banfield, the wife, Christine, the little daughter. The wife is no longer with us. You got the nanny on the right, and the man, the 39-year-old man, his name is Joseph Ryan. He too was killed. But Scott Duffey, why couldn't Brendan Banfield just get a divorce or walk away or just take his au pair and, I don't know, go elsewhere?
Boy, if I had the answer to that question, I think I could have opened up some sort of sideline consulting, counseling, investigative business, um, and maybe save a lot of people heartache. Yeah, it's just this it's an age old question, and no matter what, no matter how many times these are um, broadcasted, publicized, the horror for the victims, and then of course the perpetrators, just the stupidity that befalls them. Um, it's just day in and day out. These cases repeat themselves. Some more bizarre than others, but yeah, why not just walk away? Is
Yeah.
Couldn't answer it.
That's why Bud said, "Don't ask why, just try Bud Dry." There's no reason. So Christine Banfield, who's the woman in the blue shirt, by the way, Brianna pointing out that au pairs often end up having affairs with the people who hire them, and this case is no different. But Arnold Schwarzenegger famously, I think, had fathered a child with his au pair, but to his credit, he did not murder his wife, as far as I know, or another guy. But so Detective Phil Ramos, this woman, Christine Banfield, again in the blue shirt, she's discovered dead after being stabbed in her Herndon, Virginia home, which is Fairfax County, a very nice area. This goes back February 23rd, 2023. So we're coming up on 2 full years. She does not immediately die from the stab wounds, but she does succumb to her injuries in the hospital. And then there's a guy named Joseph Ryan, no one at this point really knows about. He's found nearby with a gunshot wound to the head and chest. Assuming you didn't know the details of this case, right? And you were called on scene here, and you've now got a dead wife with a foreign unknown male in the house. Are you making assumptions that maybe this guy broke in and attacked her? Because that's what they were trying. That's the story that they were trying to create. How do you approach this in real time?
Well, you start with what evidence you have right there in the first place, who called, um, who was involved, the location, the details of the crime scene, what evidence is left behind. It all depends. Every case is different. Every case has its own set of circumstances, and when you walk into the scene or you arrive at a scene, you get briefed by the patrol officers, and um, then you make your determination where you're going to go. Somebody's got to investigate the crime scene right away, and someone's got to get started on establishing the victimology. So it all depends on what you have to work with at the time. So when you've got a clear case of who done it, body out in the desert, it's hard. You can't even identify because they've been out there for so long. I mean, you are starting at square one, is not knowing anything except for you've got a body out in the desert, and that's when the police work starts. So in this particular case, it sounds like there was plenty of evidence there, and it sounds like there were uh, circumstances that pointed to the obvious suspect. We talked about this just a couple of days ago. First person you look at is the spouse, and eliminate them so that you can either eliminate them or not eliminate them, and based on that, that's the direction you go in.
By the way, just back to your gruesome story about this woman of the night who's found completely dismembered. How do you, something like that, where it is literally you're coming upon something and you can't fingerprint, or you can't do it. How do you start with that investigation?
In this particular case, we started with the way her body was disposed of and the location it was disposed at. Wasn't too far out of town. In fact, anybody who's driven up and down I-15 would have passed where her body was. So, and in this case, we didn't get to do the examination of the body at the scene because of the condition and the circumstances around it. She was wrapped up in several pieces of plastic and some sheets. So that entire bundle, if you will, went to the coroner's office, and we slowly started taking it apart and gathering evidence from there. So
Wow.
that was, that's, you don't often run into circumstances like that, but in this particular case, that was our best option because we knew that, number one, there was a body in there, and it had been out in the desert for probably maybe 2 or 3 days. So whatever was inside that bag was relatively fresh compared to what we usually find in bodies out in the desert. And so we wanted to get as clean and pristine evidence that was buried with the body and wrapped up with the body in a very controlled and closed area, so that we didn't risk any of the forensic evidence that would have been in there.
Again, not a job for everyone. Credit goes to Detective Phil Ramos. Mossberg Mom, my friend from Orlando. Geez, a mass shooting in downtown Orlando was during a Halloween parade, 1 block from the courthouse where Mossberg Mom and I were at. 2 dead, 8 injured. The shooter, 17 years old. Welcome to America in 2024. Living through some really depressing times here. COE, if there's a chance of getting that body cam footage from this would be great. Trisha says, calling BS on the whole au pair having affairs. I am a living nanny. I think she means a live-in nanny, but also a living nanny. That's BS. My boss is a single, wealthy businessman, daddy, and respects me from the UK. Good for him, man. Get him to watch our show. Maybe he'll like it. Now this is a child without both parents. This is true. So we're going to just continue to deconstruct this story. So this story is back in the news, and I'll tell you why. There was a plea agreement that was made just this past week. I believe it was Monday or Tuesday. Basically, the nanny here said, I'm going to cooperate with you. She was charged, of course, in connection the plea deal with the murders. The plea deal comes between she and Fairfax County, Virginia. And the prosecutor is quoted as saying, "This has been a significant step forward in this case. It's an important development in our pursuit of justice for the victims and their families." The plea deal here is related to Joseph Ryan. She was not charged in the murder of Christine Banfield, only in this guy's murder, and we're about to reveal who he is. But it all comes down to an affair. Prosecutors say that Juliana Peres Magalhaes, this woman from Brazil, and Brendan Banfield, who happens to be a former agent for the criminal division of the IRS. Scott, by the way, when you're working for the criminal division of the IRS, do you carry a firearm with you for that job? I don't know.
Yeah, you do.
You do. What do you do in that role as a criminal?
Yeah, so that's the law enforcement arm of the IRS. So the IRS is a huge agency, and of course they have auditors, people who are calling you and doing all their jobs. Those are civilian jobs primarily, and then of course you have your enforcers, and then you have your enforcement, of all criminal law related to money laundering, etc. And so thereby the criminal investigative arm of the IRS has full federal law enforcement powers.
Here more photos of Juliana Peres Magalhaes with the man who's probably going to now spend the rest of his life in prison because he wanted to hang with his 24-year-old au pair. So it all stems, prosecutors say, from an affair, which I'm about to explain. The prosecutors here say that Juliana Magalhaes and Brendan Banfield, the people you're looking at here, began this affair when she moved into their home to be an au pair back in 2022. The affair, they pinpointed it to having started back in August 2022, and now we're in 2024. So this is 2 years and change. The wife was, of course, a kind, caring woman, and for her career, she was a pediatric intensive care nurse, taking care of the most ill children. And then she's got an ill in the head husband who decides it'd be a good idea to remove her from planet Earth. The prosecutors here allege that Magalhaes and this guy Brendan Banfield basically plotted and schemed shortly after their affair began. He, according to the Commonwealth, had been quoted as saying, and I quote here, expressed his desire to be rid of his wife. And now we get into the interesting part. Plays a thing called FetLife.com. FetLife.com. It is for fetishes. Detective Phil Ramos. Different people have different fetishes, but 1 month before the murders, police find that this guy, Brendan Banfield, had created a profile on this bondage website, FetLife. He begins communicating with this guy, Joseph Ryan, who nobody really knows. This guy, Joseph Ryan, tells him he's a mixed martial artist who's into live action role playing. Let's stop it right there, Phil Ramos. I mean, you're investigating this case, and now it's taking this bizarre turn with this other guy into, the world of bondage and fetish. How do you pursue this guy to find out who he is and if he in fact is involved?
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm wondering why he began communicating with another male instead of a female. That's kind of odd to me. I'm not, I'm not familiar with that particular lifestyle. So, if you're on a fetish website, let's call it what it is. You're looking to have sex with strangers, and that go along with this particular fetish you have. So, why reach out to a guy in the first place? I would think that you'd want to start communicating with the females that were on this website. I don't know what the ratio is, but surely there's female fetishies that would have been there. I mean, why else would you go there? So
I think if I'm correct, I think that he was basically like, I don't know much about PH phishing scams, but I think he was basically pretending at this point to be the wife. And since they're on a website, I don't know that he fully knew. I don't think he knew that he was talking to Brendan per se, but still, like, as part of your due diligence, you've got to go onto this website, right? And you start looking around. Is that right?
Yeah. And then the digital forensics come into play when you've got his computer and you start digesting everything that went on in that computer. That'll give you a better idea. What other websites was he visiting? Who else was he communicating with? How long has he been a member of this website? Was he a member of any other websites? And I'm sure that's the case. So you glean so much information from the computers these days that they're just a gold mine for us, man. And even though you've got that delete button there, once it's in your system, even though you hit delete, it's still there. And credit to the FBI, because they have got the expertise to come up with that stuff just bam like that, and the equipment, and they're able to dig out information that you thought was long gone and you don't have anything to worry about. It's never gone. Once it's gotten into the internet, it's there. It may be a little more difficult to get to. It might take a day or two, but it pops up. It pops up. I was surprised. I had retired from Homicide, went back into the cold case unit a few years later, and I couldn't believe the access that we had within a week. I was reading emails on a case that itself was 7 years old, and the emails were 10 years old, and text messages that were 10 years old that we had access to. And, I thought, man, what a great tool this is.
Scott Duffey, this is a kind of a slight variation on what I asked you earlier, which is why does a husband kill his wife? But here's a kind of a follow-up. Why do they think they're going to get away with it? Because this is pretty convoluted here. Again, this guy, Joseph Ryan, wasn't known to anybody. They lured him into this, and there was a fake out where Brendan, the husband, tells Juliana, the nanny, to call this unknown guy, Joseph Ryan, pretending to be the wife. So now he asks the au pair to call the guy pretending to be the wife, and they're using this encrypted app called Telegram that you can't really follow. But Scott, why? First question: why do they think they're going to get away with it? It is convoluted. You've got to put it together, but I don't think this is a match for you or Phil Ramos or Phil Waters. Why are people under the illusion that they're just going to walk into fairyland holding hands after they do something like this?
I mean, I think there are a couple of reasons, and good for law enforcement for having eternal criminals being able to think they're going to get away with something, and are just so stupid. So they're overtaken by a number of emotions. And as I read into this case, and then of course looking at your viewers who are chiming in with other tidbits, I would be interested to know why the choice of going to a fetish website and then getting the person to come into the house ultimately to put the blame on them. My thought would be, did he just think of this out of the blue with the au pair, or was there something that him and his wife had talked about, and so thereby put the thought in his mind, okay, this will be believable. So it's just an amazing thing when people of whatever the crime they're committing ultimately must use, whether it be in the drug world, trafficking world, the fraud world, and of course homicide. Somewhere along the line, there's going to be an internet search, there's going to be a phone used, and it's just going to be their ultimate downfall. And so, I mean, and good for law enforcement constantly putting time and resources, money, etc., into developing law enforcement skills across the bat, where it's not just a federal agency that can assist, but there are amazing technological detectives, these IT detectives, these experts that are able to become experts for their own departments and help push cases forward. So I mean, I'd liken it to just humanity. We become overrun by our emotions, and I think that constant pride that that's a great idea I've come up with, and so thereby I will have done the perfect crime. And then they get to sit back and watch what they thought was a perfect crime unfold before them. So it's good for law enforcement for having human beings who do everyday stupid things and get caught. Maybe a little bit later, but ultimately, as we see here at the end, coming close to her trial, she gives it up. And I think law enforcement always had an idea what had unfolded.
Now they're getting a much better idea because the au pair is speaking. By the way, someone mentioned I just did tape Courtroom Confidential, which is Josh Ritter's podcast. He's obviously prosecutor of the year out of L.A., criminal defense attorney. He's got an amazing new show, and he's doing something cool. He's interviewing different content creators kind of about how they got into becoming content creators. It's not necessarily about true crime. So just spent a little over an hour with Josh. And I think as the person in the chat said, I think his name is Tom, it's supposed to air this coming Wednesday. So there you go. Just Scott, back to you on this real quick. So, I mean, in the Dan Markel Adelson saga that we've been covering, there was talk a lot of times because they were corresponding the family that put the murder for hire hit out on Dan Markel. They were communicating via WhatsApp, and this is Telegram. How far has digital forensics come? Because this is specifically made to not be able to, hack into it and get the information. So how far has digital forensics come? Because I know that they can now get into WhatsApp. I'm assuming they could get into Telegram, even though it's totally encrypted.
Yeah, and you're right. How far? Because primarily in the drug world and being on wiretaps, we would be able to monitor somebody's cell phone activity, their text, whatever they're sending, pictures, and etc. And then even in the sense of like WhatsApp. So when I would be on a wiretap with WhatsApp, and that so we would pick up the text, go to WhatsApp. So we would know that, okay, they're heading towards something that we at that time could not capture. And so, but that's still very useful for law enforcement. Hey, they are trying to circumvent, because even drug dealers and anybody who uses their phone for a living for criminal activity are always thinking, oh, the feds could be on my phone, or law enforcement could be on my phone. And they would constantly joke. And of course, we would be laughing right along, with our headphones on, saying, yeah, we're here. And they'd be like, boy, if the feds were listening. And then, of course, they would proceed with their with the evidence that we needed. But even in that regard, they would say, hey, go to WhatsApp. And then all of a sudden it would stop, because we would not at that point be able to get that. There are ways through, you peel back the onion, you go, you do search warrants, and you're kind of getting the information, not real time, but you could get it back time, because everything somewhat is recorded. There's always a company that is having the information. So even like Apple created this great, right, the iPhone that can't be hacked, and so even law enforcement was behind the times. And even where you had a search warrant, we had all the right court processes, and say, okay, our systems can't break this, so you would give it to Apple, and then even Apple would say, but we're not going to do it for you, because then we would circumvent our own backdoor channels, and then some hacker could be able to get in. So they would try to refuse them. And with regards to technology, law enforcement's always behind the times, because we don't have the money to pay and keep these experts on our payroll. But it's come to where, especially the courts have weighed in enough to say, hey, when law enforcement needs something and they go through the proper actions, they should be able to get it. No different than a proper cell phone carrier providing the information that is needed according to the search warrant. So these WhatsApp and these other companies, and they're changing every day, a new name, same face, to where the encryption is phenomenal, but ultimately the company has to provide that. And so it's becoming a point where even these criminals know that, okay, just about everything law enforcement can get their hands on. It may just be a day behind, but they'll catch up.
Sometimes it mutes me. I don't know what. Hello, COE. Jennifer here. I don't believe in fighting over your kids. Nonetheless, taking your spouse out. Kids need both parents. Why don't they ever think about the best interest of their kids? Kind of raise that point, and I think it comes down to the fact that human beings are basically awful people for the most part. Now, for the most part, they're pretty good, but they certainly don't compare to, let's say, dogs as a group. Dogs are much better as a group, in my opinion, than human beings. But that's just one man's opinion. Last night, Carm FaceTimed me, and Ethel was literally, she had her arm around my shoulder, her tongue dangling on my other shoulder, and Carm for a minute thought that it was the COE cuddling me until she realized that it was Ethel, and she was startled. So another reason to love dogs. By the way, Jimmy McNutty's been a trial watcher since the OJ days. I like saying that because people say that it annoys them for me to say it. But he is asking if Josh Ritter was ripping on me for the Dodgers-Yankees series. Yes. Before we even started, he did. I told him that after that fifth inning where the Yankees imploded, that I was rooting for the Dodgers. I wanted the Yankees to lose. I want them to take away 90% of Aaron Judge's $40 million. Guy drops a fly ball, and it's pathetic, and I'm angry about it. But there's nothing I can do. And if you're the Yankees, getting to the World Series isn't enough. You got to win the World Series, period. End of story. I should run the team. Okay, so Phil Ramos, here's the lure. I've broken this up. So we have the affair, and now they lure this guy in. Brendan gets him to come to the house the morning of February 24, 2023. And they say that this guy, Joseph Ryan, likely believed that he was meeting Christine Banfield to have a consensual sexual encounter involving restraints. Keep in mind, he thinks he met her on a fetish site, but he's really talking to the husband, involving restraints used on her, her clothing being cut off with a knife he had brought, and other violent sexual role play. Interestingly, Brendan had given the au pair a gun 1 month earlier, and let's hold it there. So this guy, people are going to have objections because he's on a bondage site called FetLife, and he's into, ripping clothes or whatever. But this guy is really a completely innocent victim in this crime, simply used as a pawn. It makes this crime particularly callous, I think. Do you agree with that, Detective Ramos?
Yeah. I mean, again, it's a mystery to me why the connection there with Mr. Ryan. I mean, what did he have to do with it? What was his role supposed to be in this scenario? And was it a threesome type of fetish, or was it just something that's out there about this particular kind of sexual encounter? So that part, I think, is going to be revealed once she's able to testify. Juliana, I'm referring to, and there could be a whole different reason for the connection and the way it proceeded, and how this man ended up dead. Without her revealing it, I think it's a matter of speculation of how were they able to get him so enticed into this meet, and obviously it was for sexual reasons, and I think that remains to be seen why it went from apparently a fetish threesome to two people being killed over it.
And Scott, it gets particularly, like dastardly, I guess you could say, because this is how. The husband has given the mistress a gun 1 month later. He then, on the morning of the crime, he tells her to call Christine, the wife's phone, when this guy Joseph enters the home. Right. he wanted her to say that there was a strange man at the house and she was scared. So again, the husband instructs the au pair to call the wife's phone when this guy enters the home and say that there was a strange man at the house and she was scared, obviously to continue to set this guy up. But then we come to find out that this husband had turned Christine's phone off, so the call went straight to voicemail. He turned it off. He puts it into a drawer before leaving that morning. Then the day of, Brendan gets this call from the nanny while he's waiting at a nearby McDonald's. And he was waiting there specifically so he'd be nearby. So she would call the husband, say she's terrified. So Brendan now returns home. He shoots the alleged, purported fake intruder. And then he begins, according to prosecutors, to stab his wife, who happens to be the mother of his 4-year-old daughter. Now, the reason the au pair is dragged into this, she sees after he is shot, and this is gruesome, after Joseph Ryan is shot, she sees him moving, and then she also shoots him. He tells her to grab the gun and shoot him again to make sure the job is done. And then the two report the offense as if Joseph Ryan was the intruder who stabbed Christine Banfield. I mean, Scott, it sounds like a good plan. I mean, it sounds like, you know, the fake is in, but why, in your opinion, does this just completely collapse, as most of these do?
So this isn't a very elaborate, creative lie, one after. So you really have to put a lot in place, as Phil and of course our other Phil, as we interview people. And so I didn't read anything, so I'm just going to assume, and maybe somebody knows better. Obviously, I imagine the husband provides a statement because he wants to appear cooperative, and so whatever he tells. And then, of course, the au pair is providing a statement. I would imagine law enforcement has been around. Any detective with a couple of days can tell when they hear things, it either makes sense or it doesn't. And so thereby your brain starts going into all different places. Okay. And so thereby also you really have to put together your timeline. I got a call. And then she told me, hey, there's a stranger in the house. So as you put all these things together, of course, the fact that he's able to, the husband, to shut her phone off, the wife's phone, put it in a drawer, because he's thinking, what if she picks up the phone? Then it's going to foil my plan. Maybe she'll run out. Maybe she'll do this. It's not going to work. So it will go to voicemail, and the voicemail will be there. And I can say to law enforcement, yes, she the au pair called my wife. The au pair called me. And what else do you need to know? It's all there in, perfect order. So that takes a lot. And then the fact that, as I was seeing, that this is one stabbing, one shooting. Stabbing, and anybody can tell you that when you decide to kill somebody, you're going to do it with a weapon. I mean, a knife. I mean, that's very personal. And I got to believe that as the facts lay out and as it goes forward, that there's a lot of hatred there. And it's not quick. So, yes, it's okay. That he's laying down the facts that, there's his fetish, and the fetish is going to involve perhaps a knife and all kinds of bondage toys and whatnot. And then what did it go bad? And then, of course, he comes in as the husband to save the day. That's just it's. I can only imagine hearing that story. I'd be like, wow, this is not what I expected. and it is easy to follow just what the husband is saying to and realize there are holes in that story. For example, that's why I would wonder, has she any previous um interactions where she'd be like, hey, let's do this together, and bring in a third party, bring in a swinging couple, whatever it is. If there was any discussions or website searches way in the past, not to where he formulated the plan. I have to get rid of my wife. I hate my wife, and I want to be with the au pair for the rest of my life. Where let's just say that's whatever in place a month before. Did they have any history to say, oh yeah, we've talked about that to spice our love lives a little bit and so forth, and so it makes law enforcement is able to say, no, something's not right here. It just didn't all of a sudden happen where all of a sudden she's the bad guy here. Oh, I'm gonna have an affair and do it with this this stranger on a fetish website that I've never gone to in my life up until 1 month prior. It's pretty easy for law enforcement to say, yeah, it's just not jiving. And then they start to say, okay, we got to build our case here, and that's why it feels like the pressure on the au pair was really there and sufficient enough to where she cracked.
Yeah, and she's cracking big time, and this guy's definitely going to go down for this. I have no doubt about that. A couple things came up while Scott was giving that answer. You may have seen the COE remarking that Fred is now in prison. The COE's gone to carpool to pick up the kids. Fred Brown, as much as I love dogs, the COE is sort of opposite of me. She will not let him roam the house free, which is probably a good idea because he's chewed up half our house. So I had a special sign made that I have Instagrammed out, and it says, welcome to San Quentin State Prison. And he goes into his crate. Oh, there it is. Look at that. There's Fred. Look at that. I didn't even know. How do you pull that up so fast? He also has his name hanging down there, Fred Brown. Ethel has free lay of the land, but Fred Brown, his real full name, Frederick Morris Roosevelt Brown, the Morris and Roosevelt, in loving memory of my Mabel Rose. But Fred Brown is stuck in the shoe, and he's not getting out till I get home. There you go. Now, Phil Ramos, back to the serious stuff. The last thing that this woman, Christine Banfield, saw was her husband stabbing her. And Scott said it is particularly personal. I can't imagine that that's how your life ends. It's got to be heinous. Comment on that. And then people are asking, are these husbands doing this? And by the way, some wives do it. Are they doing it because of the financial loss, having to pay alimony, child support, all these things? Or are they just, I don't know, vicious, vindictive, and revengeful?
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, there's every one of them has their own reason for taking this to such a drastic end. We've all asked ourselves, man, just go get a divorce. There's no reason for the violence. And like Scott said earlier, this is very personal. When you're killing someone or trying to kill someone by stabbing, that takes a while. Unless you know where to put that knife near any vital organs, there's a lot of places that take a long time for the body to react to. So that's why you often hear so many stab wounds to a victim. This person died after 30 stab wounds. They died after 50 stab wounds. And then there's ones, they had one stab wound to the heart and died within minutes. It all depends on the person's motive and why. Why do you want to stab somebody to death if you've got a gun available to you, which obviously they did. It's like Scott said, it's deeply personal. It could take a long time, and you really have to be driven to stab your spouse. Come on, man. There's just find another way out.
Yeah, it's just so gnarly to think about. It's horrific. A lot of people outraged with the COE. If I had it my way, Fred would be a free man. But again, he's in the shoe, at least for a little bit longer. He'll be paroled once I get home. So we've got so this is interesting because they were telling police a completely different story the day of the crime than what the nanny has now confessed to. This is body cam footage. By the way, Scott's got to leave a little early, so we're gonna probably go like another 25 minutes. We're gonna finish the story, and then I've got some true crime stories of the week. But this is body cam footage of the day of the crime. Police arriving on scene at Brendan Banfield and Christine Banfield's home. She was rushed to the hospital where she later died. This is the au pair.
I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her. And I don't know. He started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too because.
It's okay. You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw it before.
All right, so this is a much shorter version than the one we had is like 6 minutes long. Scott Duffey, I'm gonna mute it and just play it back. But I mean, what as a professional observer of people and stories, what is your take? Actually, let's watch it one more time and then I'll get your take.
And he was saying, "I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her." And I don't know. He started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too because.
It's okay. You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw it before. And he was saying, "I'm gonna kill."
Scott Duffey, what is your initial response to seeing this? This is body cam footage again in Fairfax County, Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that I believe that this is the first time she had seen something. This, no matter how you plan for it, the reality is a whole lot different. But there's, I mean, there's no tears. She been in this planning stages, and now she watched it unfold. So I absolutely believe that she is triggering some obvious senses of trauma, because she's like, wow, it's different on paper, and when you talk about it, than actually seeing it unfold. But I'm also listening to the words, because those key words early are going to be it's either deceiving you or it's very real and raw. And I could, and obviously there's a little bit of difference with regards to, there's an accent there, so I'm not sure what her full grasp of the English language is, but I can, as you see this now Monday morning quarterbacking, I can see that there are issues with how she's saying it, what she's saying, and then obviously just the total lack of tears if she were a true victim.
And Phil, something Scott said is interesting because it's kind of counterintuitive to what a lot of people are saying in the chat, is that, she is probably really stunned, because no matter how you plan for it, it is a bit of, you're still not expecting what you're going to see when it comes to the actual commission of this crime. But let's watch it one more time with the volume, and I'm curious to get your take if she just looks like she's full of what, or if there's some sincerity here. Let's watch one.
And he was saying, "I'm gonna kill her. I'm gonna kill her." And I don't know. He started stabbing her. I think Brendan shot him, and he asked me help to shot him too because.
It's okay. You don't have to get it all out right now.
I never saw it before.
Phil Ramos, your take on this acting job?
Yeah, I mean, it's a terrible acting job. Her words don't match her actions, and her actions don't match, what she's trying to say. No emotion. She's not upset like you would expect her to be. She's trying too hard to be upset, because it's just not there. I mean, anybody can, with a modicum of experience, can tell that that's a big act right there.
Yeah. So let me ask you, Phil. I mean, if you're these are the responding officers. Now they call you because it's now a double homicide, although the wife didn't die until she got to the hospital. You go out and I don't know if you ever look at the body cam footage, but I mean you're obviously going to talk to her, and if she's doing this fake hyperventilating, and you said anyone with modicum of experience like you know that she's not telling the exact truth. What's your next move? You bring her down to the station, and how do you approach the line of questioning?
Well, you just let her keep going with her act and see how many lies you can catch her in, and make mental notes to yourself where she starts falling apart and where the act is just getting obvious. And you can pretty much tell what she's lying about versus what she's trying to be very over emphatic about. And then it's hard to say whether you take them to the station or you talk to them in your car or you find a quiet place there near the crime scene to talk to them. It all depends on the circumstances. But once you know that it's an act, then you go with, we always say we hope for the best but expect the worst. And that's exactly what happens here. You hope for the best. Now you've seen the worst, you know that it's a big lie, and you just start picking apart her story and confronting her with some issues that she probably hasn't thought of it. Because you could see during this little short clip that she's trying to think on her feet and trying to come up with the words to say that she thinks she should be saying based on what she's trying to communicate to the cops.
Really fascinating to hear from a veteran homicide detective on this. So not long after this, they execute a search warrant of the home. And what do they find? Lo and behold, they find photos of the au pair and the husband in quote unquote loving poses arranged throughout the bedroom, along with the au pair's lingerie sprinkled about the room. Scott Duffey. The same month, Magalhaes is charged with second-degree murder. She is not charged in Christine's death. Her trial was scheduled for this past week. But she started to speak. She's facing up to 10 years, but the prosecutors have basically said if she continues to cooperate, then she should be let out with time served. Scott Duffey, she was charged, in this case, not in the murder of the wife. There really is there any surprise on your part that she started to sing and just talk to police and tell them exactly what happened that evening to save herself? Does it surprise you in any way?
No, it doesn't surprise me. And especially, you have two homicides, two different weapons, a knife and a gun. And the fact that she initially was charged with the homicide of Ryan, right? The stranger that comes in. And so the fact that she's not charged in the homicide early on of the wife would tell me, and that's why it'd be very interesting to see what were the stories told to police by each one, to where she's not charged with both. And so thereby the husband has got to believe, well, if they're charging her with his homicide, when I got to believe he knew each and every day that he's not charged, that he is the key suspect. So it doesn't surprise me. Obviously, with the pictures, he obviously knew everything that law enforcement had found. It doesn't seem like from the few pictures that you showed at the top of the show that he's not aware of her taking pictures. So he was very open, having been a criminal investigator, having been, with the IRS, should be very aware and alert of how law enforcement works, probably having done similar search warrants himself, looking for things on people's laptops and phones. And the fact that it's not shocking, it's not surprising, because these criminals, they always think up to but never of an exit plan, and ultimately that's their downfall. They just it's a very short-sighted reality with these individuals.
Yeah, it's a weird psychological study. I mean, there's literally guaranteed someone in this country, many more than one, planning something equally as stupid. Right now, it is. I don't know. It just never stops here. The husband never said anything from minute one. Never made a statement. So the charges against Brendan Banfield, the mastermind of all this, he's charged with 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of use of a firearm and commission of a felony in the deaths. So he's charged with both people's deaths, the wife and Joseph Ryan. His trial set to start this February, February 3rd of 2025. There's some big trials, and the plan for STS is to cover some of these bigger trials. Stefan Stearns with Matty Soto is one of them, so we'll be on that. But that's a wrap here on this story, and now on to some true crime stories of the week for the last 13 or 14 minutes, and then we will let these 2 best guests be on their Friday way. This first story was fascinating to me. Detective Phil Ramos. We've had a guest on before. He comes on frequently. Larry Levine, who's a former federal inmate. He was in for, I think, 11 years. And he, on numerous occasions on this show, has said that he actually really enjoyed prison because he didn't have to worry about his taxes. He didn't have to worry about his mortgage. Didn't have to worry about his electric bill. That leads me into this next story. Right here in South Florida, where a lot of crazy happens, there's a bank robber named Terry Meach, M-E-A-C-H. He did not plead for leniency before his sentencing last week. In fact, he did the exact opposite. He tells the judge, "I like to be in prison. Please, could you consider giving me the max or the most time so that I can get back to my normal life in a controlled environment?" And he went on and on about how he is desperate to get back to prison. Have you ever heard this before? It's kind of like reverse psychology. Maybe the judge punished him by, just sending him back for a day. But I thought it was kind of funny. Have you ever seen something like this?
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a lot of inmates are what we call institutionalized, and that's the only way that they know how to survive. And they usually get back to prison and do a little bit of housekeeping there, and that's what they like. That's what they're going to do. The truth about it is they couldn't make it on the outside because they're so used to being told when to wake up and what you're going to eat, and it's so structured in prison that when you're out and you lose all those restrictions on your life, you're the one that has to make the decisions. And a lot of them just can't do it. It's it's crazy to us, but that's a whole different animal for people to try and learn about. Is these guys and sometimes women that would rather be in prison where everything is structured and done for them instead of them having to do it when they get out.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That leads me to Ned Smith's comment. Phil Ramos, just back to you on this. These guys have been behind bars for 35 years. They could get let out in the next couple of weeks. Do you think how do you adjust after 35 years? Like, I mean, no Facebook, there was no Amazon. I mean, literally, there was basically no internet when they went in. How do you think they're going to do on the outside if they are released?
Not very well. And, we all have our opinions about this DA out there. And I was watching an interview about this very thing the other day, and he said, well, they've been in prison for 35 years. They're different. They're changed human beings. And I'm thinking, well, no kidding. Who isn't a changed person after 35 years in prison? I mean, he's trying to justify his position of, well, they've done their time. They got to get out. No, they don't have to get out because they haven't done their time. They haven't. That's something that is so frustrating to us in law enforcement. That why have we adopted this mentality of having to coddle and comfort prisoners because they've been in prison for 35 years and they deserve to be in there for much more than that. It's very frustrating to everybody that I know of, especially when you're talking about the double murder of your parents. There's no reason for these guys to get out. I don't care how much sympathy they garner from the family or any of that other crap.
Mm.
They've committed the ultimate sin, and no matter how you look at it, there's no forgiving that.
Hearing that from veteran homicide detective from the COE. Plus, they have wives. I didn't even mean to go down this road, but I'm interested in it. And we're doing a show. We did a show last week. I don't know if we're doing one this week, but they have wives they've never lived with before. What about you, Scott Duffey? What do you think it's going to be like for them? The betting odds are that they do get let out of prison. 35 years behind bars. They got married. I think one got married multiple times. I had to beg the COE to go to a Halloween party. She didn't want to go. I mean, I'm on the outside. I'm a free man. Begging women to go to parties. These guys are incarcerated. Women are throwing themselves at them. But I digress for a moment. How are they going to do on the outside, Scott Duffey? And how weird is it they're going to be in these marriages where they've never physically touched the woman before? Got to be a weird transition. What do you think?
Yeah, I there's no doubt. So I totally agree with Phil with regards to I've run into people too that are just tired. They've never really been able to figure it out, and when they're out, they know they're always in trouble, and they don't have loved ones that they can have a home. They can't hold down a job. So there's just a lot of stuff, whatever it is, whatever professional wants to call it. And so thereby they realize I'm tired of being on the street. And I do better in prison. So that it is a sad reality. And I've had people that say, hey, I did this because I need to go to jail. I've had people that say, where, especially like in a bank robbery, where it's both a state crime and a fed crime. And so it could be prosecuted either way. And they'll be like, where am I going to get the most time? That's where I want to be. So, I think the Menendez brothers, aside from your typical whoever getting out of jail, they at least, I don't know what their money situation is, right? So they have wives. I definitely would think there's going to be a couple of Netflix shows following them real time, but I don't know what the money situation, what the estate situation is. Are they able to get it, even though it's so many years later? So it'd be interesting to see what they are able to do outside of that, as opposed to somebody getting out and having no starting point. So in that regard, they may have a leg up on many that would be in the same situation. And then, of course, all these other, I imagine there are Hollywood shows willing and wanting. So they're going to have that. But aside from that, personally and mentally and whatever else way, I couldn't tell you. I hope the best, wish the best, but I totally agree, especially when not to get into politics of it, but two people and I know there's a whole history behind it, but it seems like there's all of a sudden this rush, and I don't get the rush. And
it's called Netflix. It's called Netflix.
Not only Netflix, but do you have a DA that is winding down?
Mm-hmm.
And so thereby there's a rush to get him, who they already probably knew, no matter what he did, he was going to give them a pass. And so that part I don't like, in the fact, let the system play out beyond the next DA and allow everything to come into play so yes, Netflix and any other type of Hollywood production that is able to expose some of these things in history, which may give pause to the way something was prosecuted way back when. But there's still a lot of time and review that is spent with the different levels of checks and balances within the court system to say, did we get this right or did we get this wrong? and that could play out for years. I do feel like there's some other things at play here that are making it such a rush to where it may have far more negative consequences, repercussions than trying to get two people out who a lot of people may think have had got the raw deal. So it's very confusing, but I couldn't say what they would do when they're out, what kind of lives they would have. I do believe it's a truly uphill battle from where they're at now.
Yeah.
If I could jump in here,
yeah, please.
Can you imagine the wave of filings that are going to follow this? Every prisoner in California is going to want the same deal that the Menendez brothers got.
100%. That came up. Yeah. And they're getting, a lot of people say, preferential treatment. Phantom 6000 is an attorney out in the LA area. I think they get conjugal visits. I had never heard that, but Lyle got divorced because he cheated on his wife, if I remember correctly. Man, these guys are in prison, and again, I'm a free man, and I'm having to walk someone's dog in order to get a date. I had to walk the COE's dog for 6 months just to get a date. These guys are locked up like Fred right now, and they're getting women left and right, pictures sent their way, the whole thing. Boho Hobo here says the drastic change in diet can be impossible to adjust to, depending on how much time. 35 years. Just think back on your own life if you're 35 or older about what's happened. Does Fred get conjugal visits? I'll just leave it at this. He enjoys his little pillow, and it's time for him to get. I'm really hung up. Should I get my dog neutered or not? I don't want to, but please let me know. I feel like that's cruel and unusual punishment, but that's a whole other topic. Okay, back to some really, really depressing stories, and then hopefully end on a high note. I read this and I couldn't even stomach it, so I figured, you know what? Let me share it with everybody. A woman and her 2 children are now presumed dead. She takes her 2 kids, a 9-year-old and a 5-month-old. She's 33 years old. She goes over a railing on a place called Luna Island in Niagara Falls and proceeds to jump off of Niagara Falls with her 2 kids hand in hand. The investigation has determined that this incident was intentional in nature, though the circumstances remain under investigation. New York State Police and state police search and rescue efforts are being conducted with negative results. Phil, they have not been able to find the bodies at the bottom of Niagara Falls. I mean, this is just so upsetting. Phil Ramos, what is your word of advice? Not necessarily about this story, but if you're a mother, you have postpartum depression, or you're a father and the pressure of finances and kids, and it's becoming too much, what do you recommend them doing instead of jumping off of Niagara Falls?
Talk to somebody, call someone, get on the phone or someone that you can confide in and trust them. Leave those babies alone. They've done absolutely nothing. It's not their fault that you're in the situation that you're in or that you feel the way you do. Leave them alone. That's what, I put a lot of years in, but ultimately that's what caused me to just finally pull the pin. I just couldn't take the dead babies anymore. It gets to you like nothing else. Just reach out to somebody. There's 100 hotlines that you can call. There's people you can call. Leave those babies alone.
Which leads me to another sad story. Scott Duffey, mother in Mississippi. This is to me, even more hard to believe. She is now accused of making an unalive pact. She agreed with her 10-year-old daughter, 10 years old, that they were going to unalive themselves. She gives the kid, she plies this kid with the daughter with all kinds of medication and pills. And she then backs out of it. The daughter, I think, survived after having to get her stomach pumped and all sorts of things. But she's now being held at the Jackson County Detention Center in Mississippi. She's being held on a $500,000 bond. The case has not gone to a grand jury yet. This is particularly disturbing because she's somehow rationalizing with a 10-year-old to both take each other's lives, and then she backs out. What should the punishment be for this mom?
Ooh, yeah. Whatever that the law will allow. You're not talking about two young adults here. You're not talking about two young, mentally unstable, mentally ill, whether it be mother daughter, mother sister, mother friend. You're talking about a mother, regardless of your mental status, to be able to convince a 10-year-old, a very young, impressionable, and I key up on the word impressionable, and so thereby a 10-year-old is going to absolutely follow suit with the mother, who I can believe, no doubt, led her to this path that, hey, I'm not of the right mind to be around, but I don't want to leave you or find family, friends, whatever, have to take care of you if you're but I'm going to convince you to go with me. And then, of course, for her to do everything that she did to create whatever concoction she came up with to try to poison her daughter, and then she saw the reality. Oh wow, that's not where I want to be. And so nothing short of extreme abuse, and whether it be attempt murder, whatever it is, and whatever the law allows, let her seek her help, but away from that child. And I hope that child recovers in a way, mentally, physically, and to be able to begin her next decade with nothing shy of love and support. It's just, but not to be with the one that tried to take her life, no matter what kind of pack.
Yeah, I agree. Ida Shaw here. This warms my heart. Joel, I just finished your book, Sent to My Dad, a Muslim survivor of a dictator in Guinea. That's fascinating. And he's reading it. Please send him my regards. Let us know what he thinks of it. And Ida, leave us a review. Helps us a lot. And I appreciate that. Is of course my mom's story as a child Holocaust survivor, plus the pain of losing a husband, a child. And she remains one of the most optimistic people. The book is available everywhere. A couple more quick ones, and then we're going to wrap it up because both these guys got to go. This is a bondsman breaking bad, Phil Ramos. A bondsman breaks bad here, of course, in Florida. The guy's name is Russell, but he goes by Bruce Moncrief. He's a pretty creepy-looking dude. He started to target female inmates, basically saying that he would bond them out in exchange for sex. He had them use code words if they started to know. Word got out around the jails and prisons, and if the woman would say to him that she would wash his car and or lick his eyebrows, that was another code word, lick his eyebrows, that he would help them, as I said, bond out. He also used threats of revoking, pulling, or violating their bonds as a form of force, fraud, or coercion. And then he would also sell the women to pimps for his own financial gain, just to put a little cherry on the top there. Despicable, horrible crime. He faces up to 125 years in prison if convicted. He's 75 years old right now. What do you make of this, Phil Ramos? A man who has the ability to get you out of jail and or prison, and he's only saying yes if you agree to lick his eyebrows.
Well, hopefully, whatever licenses he was given to do this are revoked, and no bond for him. And if he's 75 years old, he's not going to last that long in prison anyway. And if you got to resort to that kind of evil and deception for sexual gratification, then just turn yourself in, man, and just stay in there. Maybe you'll get some sexual gratification while you're in prison that'll keep you away from that That's sick, man. That's just sick.
Yeah, if you see the photo of this guy, you'll understand why he had to do that. Final two stories, much lighter, onto the former FBI agent. This is an international crime that has garnered attention. Scott Duffey. This is regarding 24 tons of artisanal cheese. It was stolen from one of Britain's most famous dairy companies. Now a 63-year-old man has been arrested. I think it was, I'm looking for the number. The cheese was worth over $390,000. It was taken from this London cheese specialist. This guy who they found detained on suspicion of fraud apparently went in there and pretended to be somebody else, some kind of wholesale distributor, and he nabbed the 950 wheels of cloth-wrapped artisanal cheddar. Scott Duffey, you stop bank robbers. Have you ever stopped a cheese theft?
No, I don't. I can definitely say that's a rarity. I don't think I've heard of somebody going such great lengths for cheese. So that's. I like a good Swiss cheese. I do.
By the way, does this finally surprise you that all this $390,000 worth of cheese was stolen by a 63-year-old man? Are you surprised by this?
I'm not surprised, and I will say probably elated that it's something that's not as bad and depraved. It's just somebody really enjoys their cheese. So I like the fact that nobody died over this cheese wheel.
Scott Duffey, one last question. Some people are asking how much. 24 tons of cheddar cheese. I'm just wondering if you've ever seized 24 tons of drugs and how much, like, that sounds like it's a warehouse full of cheese. How did this guy do this? I have no idea. But are you surprised at this number, 24 tons of cheddar cheese?
I'm just trying to think of 24 tons of cheese. I guess a couple of 18-wheelers of cheese. And then you have to figure out where you're going to store it, because are you going to eat it all in one setting? Or does he have a little mom and pop cheese shop? And so thereby he ran out of cheese, but has way too many crackers. So I'm not sure.
I'm wondering the same thing as Jenny. Guy's 63 years old. Did he have a truck? I mean, how did he get it? How do you just walk out with however many tons I just said it was? But it's a lot of tons. I guess he just lied to them and somehow convinced them he was a distributor. And I guess you'd believe a 60. Why would you ever think some 63-year-old guy is trying to steal, 43 tons of your cheese?
There's going to be some expensive nachos, man.
Right. Show just got cheesy. I would have to agree. A final feel-good story after all the horrors of true crime. Phil Ramos. This is a New York man who turned a rescued squirrel, in other words, a rescue squirrel, into a social media star. The squirrel's name was Peanut, spelled the typical way, but he would also spell it, just so you know, P'_nut, or just Peanut, P-N-U-T, without the apostrophe. But after putting this guy putting the squirrel on social media, complaints started to pour in. At least 6 officers from the State Department of Environmental Conservation shows up at Mark Longo's home near the Pennsylvania border in rural Pine City. He says the DEC came to my house and raided my house without a search warrant to find a squirrel. This guy's 34 years old. I was treated as if I was a drug dealer and they were going for drugs and guns. He's a mass. Peanut has hundreds of thousands of views on Instagram, TikTok. And by the way, the DEC also found Fred the raccoon in his house and took Fred as well. Did they do the right thing? Should they have taken this squirrel Peanut and Fred the raccoon, or just left them to be with this guy, Mr. Longo, Mark Longo, 34 years old? Is it crossing a bridge too far to take away the squirrel and raccoon Fred? By the way, I have a Fred, but what do you think?
You know what? I don't even know what to say on that. Maybe we could give him some of that expensive cheese.
Yeah,
They'd be happy.
that's what Ned Smith just said. Anyway, how do I thank these two best guests? Amazing time as always, going over a difficult story. Remember, if you're in a bad relationship, try not to unalive your other half. You will not get away with it, more than likely. Very quick update. Monday is Markel Monday, but we're going to have it. We were going to do something with Tim Jansen. We're still doing it, but he can only do Tuesday. So we're going to do Ask Tim anything about the Adelsons along with Joe Patuto. It's going to be like an open forum Tuesday. On Monday, by the way, Tuesday is election day. So I think we're going to do it at around noontime. So people who are voting later in the day can go out and vote here in the United States. Monday, we are going to do the Maddie Soto case. She is the little 13-year-old girl who was unalived by her mother's boyfriend. And the guy took videos and pictures, a sick crime. But there's news in that. And we're going to get to that. Wednesday will be Diddy. And Thursday, Brian Koberger, the University of Idaho. He's back in court pleading for his life. Literally, the lawyers are going to be asking not to give him the death penalty, which I don't think he's going to get around, but we'll cover that. So that's a quick look at next week. Love you, America. Love you, Vegas. Scott Duffey, love you because you're in New Jersey now and the Commonwealth. But what do you do down at the shore in November when it's freezing and dark and gray and no one's on the beach? What do you do?
I tell you, those are the best times at the beach. And I'm just looking at my neighbor who just decided to blow their leaves, I love coming down here, especially during the off season, but it also is, unfortunately for us, a seasonal place. So I'm here to winterize it, get it ready for winter until I return in the spring.
There you go. Phil Ramos. Phil, are you totally retired now, Phil? What do you do every day, Phil? Yeah, so what do you do every day, Phil Ramos? I'm curious.
Go to Starbucks and read the newspaper.
Love it.
And ride your Harley. On that note, love you, America. We will see you on the flip side. See you next week.